Let me tell you about the summer when an entire city lost its mind. Strasbourg, July 1518, Holy Roman Empire, a prosperous city of about 20,000 people, and for reasons no one could explain, people started dancing in the streets. Not dancing for joy, not dancing for celebration, dancing until their feet bled, dancing until they collapsed, dancing until their hearts gave out. Before it ended, dozens would be dead. Hundreds would be infected. This is the dancing plague of 1518, and what happened in those streets, medical science still can't fully explain it. Let me walk you through one of the strangest mass hysteria events in human history. July 14th, 1518. A woman named Frau Trophäa stepped into a narrow street in Strasbourg. She was in her 30s, and then she started dancing. Not at a party, not at a festival, just dancing in the middle of the street, alone. At first, people thought she was drunk or having some kind of fit. They watched, confused, as she spun and leaped and twisted, but she didn't stop. Hours passed. The sun set. Frau Trophäa kept dancing. Night fell. She was still dancing. The next morning, after dancing for nearly 18 hours straight, she was still going. Her feet were bleeding. She was exhausted, but she could not stop. Her husband tried to pull her away. She broke free and kept dancing. People tried to hold her down. The moment they let go, she started dancing again. By the end of the first week, her shoes had fallen apart. She was dancing barefoot on cobblestones, leaving bloody footprints, and then others joined her. Within a week, 34 people were dancing. By the end of the month, over 400 people. Men, women, young, old, rich, poor, all dancing uncontrollably in the streets of Strasbourg, dancing until they collapsed from exhaustion, and when they woke up, they started dancing again. The city watched in horror as their neighbors, their friends, their family members were consumed by this inexplicable compulsion. Witnesses described people with wild eyes, foam at their mouths, screaming that they couldn't stop, begging for help while their bodies kept moving. Some danced until their feet were so destroyed they could barely walk, but still they danced. And then people started dying. Heart attacks from exhaustion, strokes, dehydration. The bodies were carried away, and the dancing continued.
Now here's where it gets truly bizarre. The city council and local physicians met to discuss what was happening. They needed an explanation, a solution. Their diagnosis? Hot blood. They believed the dancers had overheated blood that was causing uncontrollable movement. And their solution? More dancing. I'm not kidding. The city authorities decided that the only way to cure the dancers was to let them dance it out of their system. On August 15th, 1518, the city council made an official proclamation. They built stages in the city. They hired professional musicians, drummers, pipers, trumpet players. They were literally encouraging the dancing. Instead, it made everything worse. The music attracted more dancers. The stages made it a spectacle. More people joined in. The streets of Strasbourg became a nightmarish carnival. Blood on the cobblestones, bodies collapsing, musicians playing faster and faster, and still they danced. Witnesses wrote about the horror of watching their city transform into what looked like a vision of hell. People who hadn't slept in days. Eyes rolling back. Bodies moving in ways that seem impossible. One chronicler wrote, "They danced until blood gushed from their shoes." Another described watching dancers collapse, be carried to the side of the street, wake up minutes later, and immediately start dancing again, even though they could barely stand. The death toll climbed. Some estimates say up to 15 people were dying per day at the peak of the plague. And the city's response? Keep the music playing. It took weeks before someone realized this wasn't working. By early September, the city was in crisis. The dancing had been going on for nearly 2 months. Dozens were dead. Hundreds were still dancing. Markets were closed. Businesses were shut down. People were afraid to go outside in case they too would be infected by the dancing mania. The city council finally admitted their strategy had failed, so they tried something different. They banned all music, dismantled the stages, prohibited dancing entirely. But it didn't stop. People were still dancing in silence. That's when they turned to the church. The dancers were loaded onto carts, still twitching, still moving, and taken to a shrine dedicated to Saint Vitus, about 30 miles away. Saint Vitus was the patron saint of dancers and people with epilepsy and nervous disorders. The pilgrimage was meant to be a cure through divine intervention. At the shrine, priests performed exorcisms. They placed small carved shoes, covered in holy water, on the altar as offerings. And slowly, gradually, the dancing stopped. By mid-September 1518, the dancing plague was over, but not before claiming between 50 and 400 lives, depending on which historical account you believe. The survivors were traumatized.
So what was the dancing plague of 1518? For centuries, historians and scientists have tried to figure it out. Theory 1. Ergot poisoning. Some believed it was caused by ergot, a fungus that grows on wet rye grain. Ergot contains compounds similar to LSD and can cause convulsions, hallucinations, and spasms. But here's the problem. Ergot also causes vasoconstriction, which would make it nearly impossible to dance for days on end. Plus, other symptoms of ergot poisoning, gangrene, vomiting, weren't reported. Theory 2. Mass psychogenic illness. The most accepted explanation today, mass hysteria, a psychological phenomenon where stress and fear spread through a community, causing real physical symptoms. And Strasbourg in 1518 had every reason to be stressed. Famine, disease, poverty. The region had been devastated by crop failures and outbreaks of syphilis and smallpox. People were desperate, terrified, looking for something, anything, to explain their suffering. In that context, one person's breakdown became contagious. There was also a local legend about a curse that Saint Vitus could force people to dance as punishment for sin. In a deeply religious community, belief in that curse could become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Theory 3. We still don't know. But honestly, we're not certain. Because the dancing plague of 1518 wasn't unique. Similar outbreaks happened throughout medieval Europe, in 1374, in 1463, in 1518 again in different cities. Something about the combination of stress, belief, and community psychology created conditions where reality itself seemed to break down. The dancing plague is a reminder of how fragile the human mind can be, how quickly fear can spread, how crowd psychology can override individual will. These weren't drunk people. They weren't faking it. They were trapped in their own bodies, watching themselves dance toward death, unable to stop. And the authorities, trying to help, made it worse by turning the nightmare into a spectacle. So here's my question for you. In 1518, people danced themselves to death because of stress, fear, and mass hysteria. In 2025, we have social media contagions, viral challenges that hurt people, mass movements that sweep through populations in days. We look at medieval Europe and think, how could they be so irrational? But are we really that different? What happens when an entire community believes something so strongly that their bodies respond? What happens when fear becomes contagious? The people of Strasbourg found out. They danced, and they died.